In today's video, I'm going to be doing tons of comparisons for all 5 new shades of Lisa Eldridge True Velvet Lip Colors. She brought out 5 new shades of velvets for her Holiday 2022 collection, and I wanted to take the time today to go through all of the other Lisa Eldridge lipsticks. I have the full collection and do lots of comparison swatches for these new shades so we can try to get a really good idea of how all of these shades compare to other shades already existing in her line. Before we get into it, if you like this video, if you enjoy my content and you're not subscribed to my channel already, I would love for you to consider subscribing. I do lots of Lisa Eldridge content. I'm in the middle of a series of deep dives into all 5 of the new eyeshadow palettes that she's brought out. And I do lots of other Lisa Eldridge related content, as well as on other high-end luxury and indie brands. I like to do a mixture of reviews, trying new makeup, playing with older makeup, and just sharing my love for makeup on this channel. So if that sounds like something that you would like, I would love to have you subscribe. And now let's get into all these new lipsticks and the comparisons. I'm gonna do my very best to do any relevant comparisons that I can with the other Lisa Eldridge lipsticks. But if there's something I miss or a specific comparison that you would like to see, just let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get those up on my community board as I'm able to. I figured we might as well start out with the shade I'm wearing on my lips today, which is Velvet Enchantment. So I didn't get the Enchantment liner, so I've actually paired this with the Petal liner, and I think they worked really nicely together. But let's get into the Velvet Enchantment lipstick and all the comparisons for it. So here are the relevant comparisons that I came up with for Velvet Enchantment. So this here is Velvet Enchantment, and then right next to it is Velvet Ribbon. You can see that Velvet Ribbon is just such a more vibrant, bright color. It's a true blue-based red. And Velvet Enchantment, Lisa said, is really meant to be more of a red for people who aren't as comfortable with reds. And you can really see next to that true red of Velvet Ribbon how much softer, more muted. It's a little bit more brown, perhaps. Just an easier, softer color to wear than Velvet Ribbon for sure. Next to Velvet Ribbon, we have Palazzo, which is in the Luxuriously Lucent formula. And Palazzo is another one that I think of it as a pretty wearable red. Now, part of that is the texture. It's not quite as heavily pigmented as the velvets, but part of it is just also the way that this color is balanced. It has a nice balance of undertones, not too warm, not too cool. It's not as like blue and vibrant as Velvet Ribbon, but you can see it's still quite different from Velvet Enchantment in that Enchantment is looking even more muted, softer, and a little bit earthier. And then the last one here is Spirited Away, which is another one in the Luxuriously Lucent formula. And I think that actually looks quite similar to Velvet Enchantment. So again, we're working with a different formula here, but I see a very similar balance in the tones of these two, just getting more opacity from Velvet Enchantment. So again, Velvet Enchantment, Velvet Ribbon, Palazzo, and Spirited Away. The next shade I want to look at is Velvet Rain. So I've got a number of comparisons for Velvet Rain. This is Velvet Rain right here. Next up is Velvet Petal. Then we have Sunday Matinee, which is in the Insanely Saturated formula. Then we have Velvet Blush, Velvet Blush Lightly, and then we have Rose Official and Painterly, which are both Luxuriously Lucents. I find Velvet Petal and Sunday Matinee to both be quite a bit warmer than Velvet Rain. I see a lot more, almost like a purpley undertone or a bluish undertone coming from Velvet Rain, which I don't see so much, at least in comparison, from Velvet Petal and Sunday Matinee. Then when I look at the two blushes, Blush and Blush Lightly, I do think there are similarities there, but I see a lot more blue and just kind of depth coming from those two blush shades. And then Rose Official, I think, is actually not all that different. It might be a little bit more blue, though, than Velvet Rain. Of course, we have a different formula with that one. And then Painterly is, I think, a little bit deeper, and it has more brown. It has more of that kind of chocolatey feel to it, which I really don't think you get any of that from Velvet Rain. If you wanted to see all 5 of the new velvet shades compared to each other, you can check out my first video on this collection, but I wanted to take a closer look at Velvet Rain and Velvet Enchantment and compare those here because they are 2 that I think can look very similar, but there are some subtle differences. This one is Velvet Rain, this one's Velvet Enchantment. And like I said in that first video, Velvet Enchantment just has more red, while Velvet Rain has more rosy pink in it. And maybe if I blend them out here, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. Just more warmth in Velvet Enchantment and a little bit more pinkiness and coolness in Velvet Rain. Now we're going to look at the most pink shade in this new collection. This is Velvet Pompadour. And swatched here I have Velvet Pompadour, Velvet Beauty, Velvet Petal, then Sunday Matinee, and then these 3 are Luxuriously Lucent. We have Wonder Wheel, Love of My Life, and Rosy Shell. I don't think anything looks all that similar to Velvet Pompadour. I think these 3 mattes that we have here all look a lot more muted and don't have that kind of hot pink quality that I get from Velvet Pompadour. It doesn't come across as a true hot pink, but in comparison to these look much more muted and this looks much more bright and vibrant. And then moving into the Lucents, I don't think it's very similar to Rosy Shell, which is lighter and more blue. Looking at Wonder Wheel and Love of My Life, it almost looks like a combination of these 2 colors. It has that really bright, almost neon note to it that we have in Wonder Wheel, but then it also has this kind of blue rosy pink note to it as well. So I don't really think this one is all that similar to any one of the other colors. I find it especially interesting looking at the velvets here and Sunday Matinee, because Sunday Matinee in particular I think of as a little bit of a brighter shade, but it's nowhere near as bright as Pompadour. Next, we're going to do the deep, dark blue-based red in this collection, Velvet Duchess. This here is Velvet Duchess. Right next to it is Velvet Jazz, then Velvet Ribbon, and then Palazzo, again in the Luxuriously Lucent formula. I have one other that I'm going to pull in here in a minute, but I just wanted to talk about these ones first. So the one I was most curious to compare to Velvet Duchess was Velvet Jazz, because Velvet Jazz is also a very deep red, but it's more of a neutral red. If you look at it next to Velvet Duchess, you can really see the blue tones coming through from Velvet Duchess, where Jazz has a nice mixture of kind of warm and cool, and almost a little bit of brown in it when you look at it next to Duchess. And then I wanted to pull in Velvet Ribbon, not because I thought it would be similar, but because it's the other blue-based red in Lisa's range. And she mentioned it in relation to Velvet Duchess in her reveal video. I think she just said that it's deeper and darker than Velvet Ribbon. And that is certainly true. And you can also see how bright Velvet Ribbon looks compared to Velvet Duchess. And then when we look at Palazzo, again, it's just not nearly as blue undertoned as Velvet Duchess, and it's a little bit lighter as well. Again, more of a kind of neutral red there. And just for fun, I wanted to pull in Velvet Cinnabar. Again, not because I think it would be very similar, but I just want to kind of compare the undertones because I think they're similarly deep shades. You can see the depth there. It's not that far off. But Cinnabar looks positively brown next to Velvet Duchess. So very, very different undertones, but similar depths in those shades. Lastly, we have Velvet Sorcery, which was the first shade to sell out from this collection. So right here is Velvet Sorcery. Then we have Velvet Muse, Velvet Affair, Velvet Blush Lightly. And then we have Meet Me in Berlin in the Lucent formula. And then this last one down here is not a Lisa Eldridge lipstick. This is Hermes Rose Tamisé, which I just wanted to see how it would compare to Velvet Sorcery. So looking at these, I don't see anything all that similar to Velvet Sorcery, but I think it's useful to talk about how it differs from these other ones. So I find it to be about a similar depth to Velvet Muse, Velvet Affair, and Velvet Blush Lightly, but all very different undertones there. Velvet Muse is warmer, has a lot more red in it. And then Velvet Affair, definitely warmer and a lot more brown peachy. And then Blush Lightly is just a lot more pink, and I can see a lot more kind of cool blue undertone in that one. Velvet Blush is deeper and again has more of that cool blue undertone. And then when we look at Meet Me in Berlin, it's kind of like Velvet Affair in that you can see it's much, much more brown and warmer than Velvet Sorcery. And then Rose Temise, which is the one I was kind of most curious about, looks a lot purpler, so it's cooler toned and there's not really any brown in that Rose Temise, at least when you look at it in comparison to Velvet Sorcery, which I think Lisa describes it as a clay rose, which I think is a good description. I kind of think of it as like a milk chocolate mixed with a mauve with a little touch of rose in there. So I think it's quite a unique color and it's incredibly versatile. I found that while I've been working with the Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow palettes, this shade would go with pretty much any one of the eyeshadow palettes, which is really quite something. So that tells me that it's not too cool and it's not too warm. It has a nice neutrality in the undertone and just a neutral effect overall while still having quite a beautiful, strong impact in its own kind of understated way. So those were all the comparisons with these 5 new velvets that I thought would be the most helpful and the most relevant. But do, as I said, let me know if there are any particular comparisons that I didn't do here that you wanted to see, and I will do my best to get those up on my community tab. Let me know if you have any other questions or comments. I always love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.